I think we can get started, Bilal. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing well. I like doing these things. It's great. We get to put information out to people who need it most. So it's a good morning that we're able to do this.
100% agree with you. I am beyond excited that we get to put this information out there to anyone who's technically been injured here in the state of California. So, this is the ultimate webinar. It's going to help you really get an understanding of what's happening within the workers' comp system. It's going to allow you to gain the knowledge, to get the tips that not a lot of people share for you, but today we get to do that and navigate the workers' comp world like a pro. It is going to be hosted by yours truly, Carmen and Bilal Kassim, which we'll be diving into a little bit later in regards to what we're going to be kind of sharing about ourselves as well, who we are, what we have for you guys, and so on. So, I want you guys to truly take this moment to turn off your phones, really concentrate on what the information that is going to be shared with you today is going to bring for you if you've been injured. In this webinar, you're going to learn those key steps to protect your rights, to understand what benefits you are essentially entitled to, and more importantly, it's going to be to gain clarity on the entire process from start to finish when it comes to your workers' compensation claim. And I know that a lot of people start in different time frames within their claim. So therefore, we're going to be digging into different scenarios that you could possibly be bumping into. And we're also going to be discovering a lot of benefits that some people may not otherwise know if they're not even told. So we're going to be able to share a lot of information for you in regards to the California workers' comp world, the system, and how it's not 100% perfect. So, who is this webinar for? It's for any injured workers ready to take control. If you are tired of running in circles with the system, you can't get a hold of the right people, you don't know how to manage or how to better communicate with your claims adjuster, with the doctors, well, then this webinar is for you. It's also for the people who have been hurt on the job and need help. When you're stuck in the system, it could feel like you're just running in circles and it's a never ending story. Not only is this for injured workers, it's also for people who have developed illnesses throughout, working in a certain job or in a certain position. This is also going to benefit you. If you're unsure what benefits you are entitled to, if you've been told one thing by one person and then you go and try to do your own due diligence and search for this information on Google and you seem to find other benefits that you didn't even know about, this is definitely the webinar for you. And if you're feeling frustrated or overwhelmed with the process, because it can take a toll on you, on top of having to recover, you still have to figure out how to work through the system. So if this is your scenario, then this webinar is definitely for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Bilal Kassim. So Bilal, I'm going to talk a little bit about you, and you can feel free to add on to this as well.
Okay.
And so, yeah, for those of you that don't know, Bilal Kassim is the co founder and managing partner at Pacific Workers, the Lawyers for Injured Workers. It's a law firm here in Northern California dedicated to help injured workers throughout California for sure. You have 15 plus years in the workers' compensation law, and you've been nominated for Lawyer of the Year. So, I kind of want to dig into a little bit about your history within these 15 years in the workers' compensation law to kind of figure out where we're going to get this information from. So, if you may kind of share a little bit of what you've accomplished within those 15 years of working in this particular part of the law.
Yeah, of course. I started off as a law clerk at a law firm in college in workers' compensation, and I never knew I'd actually end up there as my career. But, at the time, I worked with a bunch of great applicants, attorneys who represented injured workers, and I got a lot of firsthand experience with the system and just generally workers' compensation. I was just a college kid at the time, so I didn't really get much time in the files or working on substantive issues, but I got to touch reception and things like that and actually get to talk to people and realize, there's a human component to it. I think after law school, I actually started working in employment law. I represented employers for, wage and hour, discrimination, wrongful termination cases, things like that, and then ultimately started representing insurance companies and employers for things like termination and retaliation, specifically for workers' comp, or things we call serious and willful misconduct, where employers caused injuries. From there, I actually started just representing insurance carriers in workers' comp cases. So, what we've left out here was my time in the dark side, I guess. I used to be an evil defense attorney for the insurance companies, which, I did my time there, and I think I cut my teeth, and it actually gave me a lot of experience to give me the confidence and skills I needed to actually go start helping injured workers in the right way. So, I've been doing that since 2014 now. Started the firm with my co founder, Eric Farber, and we've been representing injured workers. I think now almost 10,000 injured workers throughout the state of California. We've recovered, I think, close to $350 million for those people. We're kind of like the Robin Hood of workers' comp, taking from the insurance company and giving it to the people who need it most. And so, yeah, that's where we've been, doing nothing but helping our community.
That's really amazing to hear. I like how you've shared that you've also been on the opposite side of the workers' compensation system. It's almost kind of like a benefit to you that you get to know the tactics of potentially who you're going against with, to be able to truly identify, what are those pain points that injured workers are going through when it comes to battling it out, because at the end of the day, you are battling, you're fighting for your rights, you're fighting for your medical treatment. So having that type of experience, is definitely a plus. So for those of you who are hesitant, and really, are afraid to kind of trust, there's this thing where it's like, there's a lot of people who have said or categorized the attorneys nowadays into the trust bar. And essentially, there's like almost zero trust for attorneys for whatever reason. I think a lot of people are afraid, or they have, maybe some of the ideas that we see in movies that all lawyers are bad lawyers, but that's not necessarily true, and we're here to help you with that. It's particularly in the ultimate guide to the workers' compensation world, for sure. My name is Carmen. I am the community director here at Pacific Workers Law Firm. I'm an advocate for injured workers. I host, along with Bilal, the probably one of the best workers' comp podcasts out there, and not because it's our podcast, but because it truly does dive into those frequently asked questions, and we are able to also share a lot of tips on that podcast. And if you haven't yet followed us, make sure you do so. You can find us on any platform that you prefer to listen to podcasts on, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. You could definitely find us on YouTube as well. That podcast is called Work Comp Talk, and you can totally just go on any social media platform and find it there as well. And then, of course, we have the company, Pacific Workers, the lawyers for injured workers. It has a 98% win rate here in the state of California. It's the highest average recoveries in California law firm as well. So there's a lot of benefits for you that are just joining us in this live webinar that we've pretty much created for you, to be able to give you the knowledge and the tools that you need to go through the workers' compensation system just like a pro would. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there. You guys can visit as well, pacificworkers.com, to check them out. Book a free consultation. Consultations are free. If anyone is trying to charge you for a consultation, you better run, and you better run quick. So I guess we're going to dive into the first question, Bilal. Who can bring a workers' comp claim here in the state of California? So if you can kind of guide us a little bit through, what type of people are able to bring a claim to surface here in the workers' comp system.
Sure. I mean, it really boils down to, are you an employee and did you get hurt at work? Those are really the main questions. It doesn't matter whether or not you're a part time employee, a full time employee, an employee who got injured during the first 10 minutes of their training on their very first day of work, they're entitled to workers' compensation. And the second part being, were you hurt at work? Were you in the course and scope of your employment where you know, injured during work hours, not on lunch or after work or before work. And that's really it. You know, unlike civil cases, we don't account for negligence. You know, it doesn't matter if you're doing something incredibly stupid. You know, at the end of the day, it's very basic.
So what you're telling me is if I'm having a little bit of fun time during work hours and I'm spinning in a chair at the office and I just so happen to break the chair, fall, hit my head, like that negligence part doesn't fall on me because I was being,
No, no, it's silly, and people will probably make fun of you for it. But if you're spinning in circles in your chair and you fell off and cracked your head open, it's going to be fair game for workers' comp. You know, obviously, there's carve outs, right? If
right.
you're drinking on the job and you go and drive a car and you crash, that's not workers' comp. It would be barred because of your own voluntary intoxication. Or if you start a fight with your coworker and then they beat you up, that's not workers' compensation. So I think you have to ask yourself, is it just something in the course of employment, you know, and that's pretty much it.
Right.
Drinking on the job, that's not course of employment. Fighting with your coworkers, that's not course of employment, right?
Makes sense. Okay, great. I know we're right around the holidays, and for those that are going to be watching this webinar throughout the time, and if you are a seasonal employee, whether that's working during springtime, working during summer, picking up like specific shifts as a temporary employee, and the holidays, right? All these extra job openings and job offers. Where does that fall into place for people that are filing a claim? Do they also get entitled to the benefits that come with workers' compensation?
Absolutely. Seasonal workers, which you see a lot, and seasonal not just in like, you know, Amazon folks that are hired to deliver packages during the holidays, but also farm workers, migrant workers, you know, people who work jobs that are only during a specific, you know, literal season. Those people are also entitled to workers' compensation, you know, or contract employees where they were hired for a specified period of time, you know, even if it's just a week, it doesn't matter. You know, those people are entitled to workers' compensation benefits as well. I think really the main issue that we've had to fight over lately, just in terms of whether entitled to workers' compensation, is if you're an employee. You know, a lot of people are misclassified as independent contractors, and you know, it's not your title that controls; it's how you're treated that controls. You know, you can't hire someone on as an employee, call them an independent contractor, and then skirt workers' compensation laws. And that's something that's actually really common, and we see a lot, probably more so than ever in workers' compensation cases. So, for anyone who's been told you're an independent contractor, I would always think twice and potentially consult an employment attorney as well, because in addition to maybe getting workers' comp benefits, there might be some employment law issues there as well.
That is great to know. So, again, for those of you who are considered a contractor, you're not always considered a contractor. And if you're in doubts, definitely hit up a free consultation so that you can get truly identified what you are doing for that employer and not miss out on any opportunity that you might have. I also want to take the time now to encourage everyone, if you stick to through the end, if you've registered through the email that you've received on the link, you also get the opportunity to download the free pocket guide. So that's a book that was written by Bilal Qasim, by Pacific Workers. It's a free pocket guide book, and it does talk a lot about these differences, right? What's considered a full-time, part-time, and seasonal employee. You're going to find all that information and much more. You can also visit pacificworkers.com, and you can download it on the website as well. So moving forward, if you fit into any of these categories, in regards to what we've just spoke about, you know, whether you are an injured worker, you've gotten an illness at work, you are a full-time, part-time, seasonal, temporary, and yeah, you're in need of you know, some type of advocate for you, then you are entitled to file a claim. Let's talk a little bit, Bilal, about the work-related illnesses, because I think a lot of people might not necessarily understand that illnesses are also covered in the workers' comp system here in California.
Yeah, I mean, when we think of injury at work and workers' comp, historically, people think in their heads like, oh, you know, Bob that fell off a ladder and, you know, hurt his neck and back, or the guy that cut himself with a saw, or, you know, the things that are tangible, the things that are just, they happen, they're a specific injury. There's also things we call cumulative traumas. There's injuries that are kind of silent, you know. People may work in construction for 30 years and not know that they're slowly ruining their back or their knees or their elbows or their shoulders. You know, same thing goes for plumbers, electricians. There's also diseases as well. You know, we've had people who contract tuberculosis at work, people who've contracted HIV, or even, you know, bus drivers who are outside in the sun all day, every day, waiting for students, develop basal cell carcinoma from being in the sun all the time and standing outside, unlike other jobs. So there's a lot of diseases, communicable diseases, as well as you know, diseases like cancer and such that people can get from their work.
Right. Well, I'm glad that we're going to be able to share a little bit about everything in regards to, some of the things that you've probably seen having the 15 plus years in the workers' comp system law area as well. So, if this is you and you are eligible to file a claim, then we highly recommend you seeking a free consultation just to make sure that you're putting all of your ducks in order and that you're protecting yourself at the end of the day and that you're making sure that you're going to be entitled to receiving the benefits that you deserve. So, definitely make sure you get that free consultation and try to get as much information as you can because why not? It's free. So let's talk about the benefits that someone who recently opens up a claim has the option to, I guess, receive. And it's almost, it sucks that I use the word option to receive because it should just be a given, right? Like if you get injured at work, this should just be automatically given to you, and it doesn't always happen. And I'll start with the first. That is getting a workers' comp claim form, the DWC1 form. Sometimes you're not even able to get a hold of that form from your boss or from the person that's supposed to get it for you, right? So making sure that you have all of this information handy definitely makes a difference. So what are some of the benefits on top of what we've kind of discussed in some of our videos on YouTube? For those of you guys watching on YouTube, thank you for following. Can we break it down to what essentially workers' compensation gives you? What are you entitled to?
Sure. So I think we've got most of it outlined here. Obviously, it's far more complex than just four sentences. You know, I think the caveat here, as my lawyer answer, is for all this stuff, it depends, right? But generally speaking, you get hurt at work, you're supposed to have your medical care provided for you at no cost. You're supposed to get temporary disability payments, which is wage replacement while you're recovering from injuries. Once you've leveled off such that medical treatment is not going to make you any better, then you should be entitled to permanent disability if you still have functional impairment. And then if you ultimately can't be accommodated at work because of permanent work restrictions, you're entitled to job retraining benefits. Those are really the big four. But, the caveat for this stuff is that, workers' comp as a benefits delivery system is very complex and it's become far more litigious over the years. And people are getting a lot less of this stuff. And really, they have to fight for every inch they get. And this is especially true for medical treatment. Medical treatment in workers' comp isn't as easy as just going to your doctor and them ordering a bunch of tests, giving you a bunch of prescriptions, and then you're covered, right? They have something called utilization review, which means when your doctor wants to prescribe treatment, they have to ask the insurance company for permission first. And the insurance company can say yes, they can say no, or they can say maybe you get some of this. And I think that is the biggest point of frustration for injured workers in workers' compensation cases because, of course, the insurance company is the one that has to pay for it, but they're the ones that get to say yes or no. That there's a really big conflict of interest there, but that's just the way the law is set up right now. And we have very limited means in which we can fight those battles. But as lawyers, we do know what to look for. There's a lot of rules and requirements that go into insurance companies authorizing and denying medical care, and there is an appeals process if medical care is denied. It's probably a longer conversation for a different webinar, but needless to say, it's not always that straightforward.
Okay, you
Temporary
mentioned.
disability is. Oh, go ahead, Connie.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt, Ball. You mentioned something really important within this. You said, this happens a lot. And everyone say hi to Bilal's cat.
Sorry, I left the door open and she jumped on my shoulder.
It's okay. We accommodate cats, dogs, and anyone who's interested in helping their owner heal and feel better for sure. How often do you see these, say someone's getting their medication denied, or they're waiting on the insurance company to approve. How often do you see this unfold?
All the time. I'd say 99% of our clients come to us because medical care is not being provided. And that could be a combination of things. It could be the really bad doctor that the insurance company sent you to when you first got hurt at work. Could be a doctor that doesn't know how to request authorization properly. Or it could just be the utilization review process that you experience. But we see the insurance company deny the silliest things, over the counter Tylenol, or, the most basic testing that the doctor wants to do to identify, a condition, whether it's a spinal injury or something else. I think at the end of the day, sorry, she's very active today.
She's like, Daddy, Daddy, I want to play.
Okay,
All
she's just
right.
hanging out on my shoulder. No, I mean, I would say in almost all cases, we see this stuff. I think it's unfortunate that it happens as much as it does, but, at the end of the day, the insurance companies want to save money. Their job is to take in more in premiums than they pay out in claims so that they can actually, save a few pennies. And if that means taking money and benefits that should be paid to the injured worker and keeping it to themselves, that's what they're going to do. So, I would say I couldn't give you an exact estimate of what percentage of injured workers get the care they need versus ones that don't, but it's a lot. It's a pretty high percentage.
What is one of the biggest misconceptions that you would say happens when people are going into temporary disability benefits or payments versus the permanent ones? Like,
Is a rule when you get hurt at work, you should be paid temporary disability. And if you have work restrictions that can't be accommodated, or you're just off work completely because you've had surgery or something, most people would say, yeah, you're injured, you're off work, you should get benefits. But there's so much nuance to it that, a lot of people are just expecting that the day they leave work because of an injury, they're going to start getting benefits paid. And it's not always that clear. Sometimes claims are denied, sometimes there's a dispute because the employer says that they're able to accommodate work restrictions when they're actually not. They're lying, basically. They say they made an offer of modified work to the client and the client denied it. There's a lot of he said, she said. There's a lot of factual disputes, medical disputes, legal disputes that can delay payment of temporary disability. We've had claims where someone's been denied temporary disability for well over a year before we were able to get all our discovery done and get to a trial and get them an award of back benefits. But it doesn't matter if they get paid those benefits a year later if they went a whole year without income and now they're homeless, they had their children taken away, they lost their car, what then? Workers' comp doesn't pay for that. So it's like, cool, you get the money you're owed at the end of the day, but at what cost?
yeah, it definitely changes people's lives, and it's unfortunate, that that's a really high majority of cases, if especially if you don't really know how the system works. You're not even sure what you're supposed to get paid. It's already complicated enough when women are pregnant and they're taking on that family medical leave act, because they want to bond with the baby, and you feel like you're getting robbed of your time and your money, and they're not really giving you everything that you're entitled to. Just imagine what it's like when you're injured at work and you're going to a similar situation where you're not going to be able to go to work. Can you talk a little bit about the job retraining? What does that look like? Does everyone even know about this?
Sort of. I mean, it's watered down from what it used to be. A long time ago, there was something called vocational rehabilitation, which is far more substantial than we have now. Now, job retraining is basically reduced down to two benefits. You get something called a supplemental job displacement voucher, and then California has something called the return to work supplement. The supplemental job displacement voucher is a voucher given to you by the insurance company if, when you have permanent disability, your employer cannot offer you permanent modified work. And so that's all it boils down to. The whole idea is if you are forced out of employment because of a disability, the insurance company is obligated to kind of help you get back up on your feet. And that voucher is good for up to $6,000 in education or job retraining related expenses. So, Cal State accepts the voucher. You can use some of it for a laptop. You can use it for coursework. There's a bunch of different categories of things you can use it for. And then the return to work supplement from the state of California is just an additional $5,000 payment that you get. The whole idea, again, is hey, California has an interest in seeing its citizens, its residents, get back on their feet. And they want them to have extra money to be able to support themselves through the retraining and reeducation experience. So if you're forced out of your employment, in addition to that voucher, California will also give you a $5,000 payment. And you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to put it towards education, that's cool. If you want to put it all in black in Las Vegas, you can do that
Oh
too.
God. I
Probably
hope.
not the best thing to do if you're out of employment, but you have the option. The money's there to support you, to help you with your next steps in life.
Right. So it's kind of like an information towards the end of this that is given to you when you're injured. Does everyone receive this information? Like, let's say someone did not hire an attorney. Let's say someone went through the system. What are the odds of the insurance company letting them know about the job retraining programs?
That's the funny thing about this stuff is like you don't. Insurance companies are supposed to be giving you this information throughout your case, but they give you the information when you come to it. Like, I don't find out that I'm entitled to a voucher until I've been forced out of my employment at the end of a case and they're required to send me the proper forms. But maybe they don't send me the forms, or maybe, they say I didn't qualify. And so I'm told that here you're getting the forms, but you're not entitled to this. And you're going to take whatever they say or give you at face value. But as a lawyer, I know these things ahead of time. When the client comes to me when they're first injured on the job, I know at some point they may or may not be entitled to the voucher, and so we strategize and litigate their case in a way to meet their goals. If their goal is to go back to work, that's what we fight for. If their goal is to get the voucher and go somewhere else, that's what we do too. But when you're an injured worker and you're going through this for the first time or the second time, you may or may not get the information in the first place. You may get the wrong information and you don't know ahead of time. So it's very problematic for people who are trying to plan their life, rather than just day by day as their injuries take over and force them out of their employment.
Yeah, I sure would hope that if I was in a situation where I was essentially going to go through that route, I would want to know and have a plan ahead of time and not just be like, surprise. There's something you've always said in some of the videos that we've shared in regards to, some of the tips and some of the advice we give on our YouTube channel, and that's you don't know what you don't know. You're taking for whatever reason, whatever the doctor's telling you. If the doctor's telling you, hey, you are no longer going to be able to walk again, you're going to believe that, and you're going to put that in your brain and not necessarily work through any physical therapy to try to get yourself to work again because your doctor said there's no chance in the world you're going to be able to, right? So again, there's a lot of misinformation given out there, and unless you know the law, there's no other way for you to find out what your rights are.
Yeah.
It sucks. So, speaking about your rights, I think one of the biggest questions that we get a lot in some of our podcasts and as well as some of the videos that we upload to social media is how much can you get in settlement? If not, it's probably the most important question that everybody wants to know, right? How much is my case worth? So, can you walk us a little bit of what this looks like?
Yeah, the biggest component of a settlement in most cases is the permanent disability.
Okay.
And there are some, workers' comp is pretty formulaic in the way cases are valued. We count different types of injuries or medical conditions or surgeries or treatments, and those all kind of have set values to them based on, functional limitations and things like that. So it's as formulaic, I think, as it can get in terms of damages. What really happens though is when you talk about the value of a case being built on permanent disability. Permanent disability is the functional limitations you have after an injury is treated and can no longer be improved from medical treatment for the foreseeable future. That means assessing the value of a case at the beginning of the case is very difficult because we don't know where the case is going to go. You could have I don't know, you could have a total knee replacement, which, to some extent has a set value, but the outcome of your knee replacement is going to dictate, the value either going up or down. It's the same thing with like a back surgery, right? Let's say you have something very basic, a herniated disc, and you have something called radiculopathy, which means you experience numbness and tingling and burning in the leg because it's your disc issue in your lower spine is impacting the nerves. Something like that in workers' comp has kind of a set value to it. It may have like a 10 to 13% disability rating. But let's say you get a back surgery in your workers' comp case for that, and the back surgery goes wrong. Let's say
Oof.
the doctor really messes up and now you're paralyzed from the waist down. I, as a lawyer and certainly as a client, wasn't anticipating that at the beginning of the case. So if you walk in my door as a client and say, I've got a herniated disc, how much is my case worth? I might tell you, hey, maybe it's worth 50 or $60,000 or 70, whatever it is, just using arbitrary numbers. But you could take a turn for the worst, and your case could be worth way more than that, because of mistakes, delays in treatment, medical malpractice, a bunch of things. The same can be said about other conditions. You may have a debilitating condition which keeps you off of work, but it's completely fixed through medical care. A very common occurrence we see is hernias. Hernias are repaired with basic surgery. Usually it involves putting in a mesh, preventing the hernia from popping out again. And hernias can be debilitating, but once fixed, a lot of people don't have symptoms anymore, and so they have a very low permanent disability rating.
Right.
So every case is different. I think when we're looking at the value of cases, we're really talking about what's the person's medical condition, what's the likely permanent disability rating from that condition, and then what are their future medical needs going to be. Those are really kind of the large buckets of money, permanent disability being the biggest.
So it's definitely formulated, obviously, depending case by case. You said something really interesting earlier right now, and that was you can't really put a value on it from the get-go. However, there are attorneys that will try to get the business of the injured worker and put a value to it. What does that mean?
There's some estimates. I've been doing this long enough where I think about body parts in my head as certain monetary amounts. I can tell you if you have, an amputation of your index finger, how much that's worth in terms of a percentage of permanent disability. I can tell you, there's something called if you have a torn meniscus in your knee, a procedure called a meniscectomy. I can tell you how much that's worth. I can tell you what an average knee replacement's worth, things like that. I think any lawyer that's done that long enough can kind of estimate, but it's a very loose estimate. It's a very
Right.
loose estimate because cases can zig and zag, and injuries don't affect people the same way. You may have more than one body part that's injured, and so your permanent disability may be substantially more magnified because of that, and there may be a need to get a vocational expert involved and stuff. So I always try to steer away from giving estimates at the beginning of cases, even if I have some loose estimate of what I think it might be, just because one, I don't want to build up false hopes, and two, my focus isn't just getting the case settled. My focus in taking on a client is to help them get the care they need, to get the benefits they're entitled to, and then when we get to settlement, we get to settlement. Settlement's always going to be there. That's not the focus of helping someone. The focus on helping someone should be getting them their life back. Then, and
Yeah.
if you can't, you get them a settlement to the extent you can. But I feel like the focus on settlements is kind of the wrong focus when we're taking on a case. And when people go to a lawyer, they should be focused on what's the lawyer going to do to help me get better and get me the care and benefits I need now, not how big's the check at the end of the day when I'm still injured and I'm out of work and nothing's better.
Yeah, because imagine you do get that big check at the end of your case, right? And you're now stuck with having to pay all this future medical. You don't know what you're going to be able afford with that money. Like maybe inflation goes 10 times worse than what we have it here in California, you know? So obviously within that settlement that they're getting at the end of their case, it's supposed to cover all future medical care for them or anything that could potentially come from this injury. So yeah, you can take a big lump sum in the beginning and be done with the system. However, that money is just going to go back into into your healing, into your feeling better, right? So
Yeah.
settlements encompass then the medical costs of all future care for that injury or for that illness, any wage loss, any compensation time that you were off of work because you were trying to heal. Obviously, we've talked about permanent disability payments, which are based on the severity of your injury. How does it come into play when, say, my best friend and I both had a similar injury, but she got more money than I do, and then I come to you, Bilal, and I'm like, hey, why are you giving me less than what my friend got? Her attorney got her like $50,000 more. How do you explain that to someone when they think about a settlement and how much they're entitled to because someone else recently went through that as well?
There's so many factors. Generally, there's two types of settlements, right? There's something called a CNR, compromise and release. That's where they pay you a lump sum to go away. They just cut you a check and that's that. Stipulated award is the other type of settlement where you receive biweekly payments of permanent disability until that's paid out. And then you also have open medical care paid for by the insurance company. Obviously, the difference in value could be tremendous just based on that. Someone who's getting their medical bought out versus someone who's just getting their permanent disability. You can't force the insurance company to buy out your medical care. And so if the insurance company chooses to settle with you and buy out your medical care, you're often compromising on what the value of that is. It could be that the insurance adjuster is inexperienced or just doesn't care and throws out more money to buy out medical care than the next adjuster. You could have the same adjuster, the same applicant's attorney, but a different defense attorney, a different doctor have a different outcome. You could have everyone the same except change the insurance adjuster and you're going to have a different outcome. Different doctors and evaluators in the case can change the outcome. There's so many variables that change in any given case. It doesn't matter if you have the same exact injury, each case will have a different outcome. And I think,
Well, I mean, people are different, they're different ages, you know. There's a big difference between someone who's a little bit older and has the same injury as a younger person in
yeah,
regards to recovering, right?
and the value of the permanent disability. The impairment that doctors provide in a case when they evaluate an injured worker can get adjusted based on the type of injury, the occupation of the person who's injured, as well as that person's age, because all injuries don't impact people the same way. If I get my leg chopped off as a lawyer, I can probably still do my job. As a firefighter, a police officer, construction worker, toast. That's it for me. And so the injuries and the value of those injuries get adjusted up or down based on those factors as well. So, you could have someone who's 65 who needs a total knee replacement have a much different outcome than someone who's 20 and has it.
Right, right. Earlier in this webinar, you mentioned that, you used to work for the defense attorney. You were on the opposite side of the workers' compensation world, which is obviously advocating for the insurance companies. Can I ask you, what are some of the red flags that you can give a tip to anyone who's watching this webinar to kind of like, hey, be on alert when it comes to getting this settlement? What are some of those red flags or what are some of those things that defense attorneys would pull while they're trying to get into a settlement?
I don't know if it's specifically just during a settlement, but there's a couple tools they use. They use something called an ISO index. An ISO index is a pool of information that insurance companies share. So when you go apply for new renter's insurance or automotive insurance, pet insurance, the insurance companies share information about you. And that information can be based on your name, your date of birth, past addresses, social security number, a variety of information. And that's used by them to help associate whatever risk they're taking on with your profile to price your policy accordingly. So if you go and apply for new insurance for your car and they see you've been in 30 different accidents that were all your fault, they're going to jack up your price.
Right.
And the insurance companies in workers' comp use that information to look at your past claim history. So they want to know if you've been in prior car accidents, if you had slip and falls, prior workers' compensation cases, to see whether or not you've got, called a record of prior claims, to be able to dig in and find information to try to say that some or all of your medical conditions are pre-existing. They'll also use your medical records. They use depositions to gather information about your medical history, and they'll subpoena all your past medical records, again, to try and point out that things predate your workers' comp injury or unrelated to work itself. They also use something called subrosa. Subrosa is an old Latin term. It literally means under the rose. Basically, it's like hidden spy stuff, right? It's like the
Right.
guy who's following you around with the camera, recording you at the gym when you say you can't work out, or following you to the grocery store to catch you lifting a bag of groceries when you said your wrist's too injured to lift anything. And they'll literally follow you around,
Yikes.
document anything and everything they can. And the same thing goes for social media. They hire people who will go online and look for any little bit of information they can find about you and create a profile to try and catch you doing things you're not supposed to. And they use all these tools to basically try and knock down the value of your case.
Wow. So it is true. They do have PI, private investigators, kind of seeing what you're able to do and not to do. And people have gotten caught. I've heard there's been so many stories in the news of people that have gotten caught for fraud and whatnot. Particularly people that say they can't do their job, but yet they're picking up side hustles, doing exactly that, the job that essentially got them injured. So you're going to definitely want to be super careful in regards to, what you do during your free time and what you've said during your depositions and during some of the stuff that happens within the workers' compensation world. So I'm glad we were able to discuss that and kind of have an idea of what are some of the tactics that defense attorneys can use for settlements. But another one of the biggest questions that people have when they're injured or they have a work illness is how long does it take to settle? How do you understand or how do you explain those time frames, that people essentially feel like, well, why didn't my best friend? She only had 3 months in workers' comp. It's been a year for me. Like, how do you explain that?
Every case is different, and that's it. Whether it's the people involved, the doctors, the insurance adjuster, the attorneys, the nature of your injuries and time to heal, whether your case is denied or accepted, and there's a trial that needs to happen about whether you're an employee or an independent contractor, whether you were hurt on the job because you were drinking or not. There's a variety of things that can go into play. I think the thing to understand is that in workers' comp, it's just kind of like the cases go until they don't, right? There's no deadline that we're trying to beat. In civil court, for example, they have something called fast track, where it's a system where they try to get 75% of all cases done, I believe, within 18 months, meaning from filing the case to your trial, that's your time. Workers' comp doesn't have anything like that. Like, you're not setting trial dates at the beginning of the case, you're not setting out discovery plans or anything like that. It's really just the case stays open until the person's permanent and stationary for all body parts, and the case is ready to go to trial on the merits, assuming all other issues are decided. So
Right.
sometimes these cases can take months. Sometimes the insurance company offers a settlement the first 30 days. Sometimes I've had cases that I've worked on for almost a decade, and everything in between. If I had to give you an exact time, because we looked this up in our office, cases on average probably take around 18 months.
Okay. Now, is it true that when you settle quickly or when they give you the first 30 days and like, hey, we want to settle, are you ready to settle? Is that because they know something is going to be more costly in the future and they rather just get you out of the way now and essentially just offer you less money?
Most of the time, yeah. It's dangling a carrot in front of a hungry donkey or horse, whatever it is, right? Like they know you're injured, you're off of work, you're suffering, maybe you have bills, and they want to dangle some small amount of money in your face, thinking like, oh, this person's poor, they're going to take it. Like, how insulting is that? Is a person who's injured to have like this money just dangled in front of your face, like, because it's meaningful to you, but they
Right.
know it. They know it's meaningful to you, but they also know it's not what your case is worth, and that's why they're throwing it out there because they think that you're so needy that you're going to take it and set
Oh gosh.
aside your own health and welfare and caring for your family just to take some quick bucks. But I'd say more often than not, the offers are complete garbage. It's, the case is worth 100,000, they're offering 10, or 20 or something like that. It's insulting. But they do it because they know some people will take it because they
Yeah.
need it.
And it goes back to they don't know what they don't know. They don't even know that their case could have potentially been, entitled to 100,000, and instead they go and take those 10,000 because to them that seems like a lot of money. But then put into perspective when it comes to handling that surgery or handling any other future medical needs, those $10,000 are going to be absolutely nothing compared to what the company should have paid, right? The insurance companies. So
Yeah.
that's good to know. I think our next one is something you touched on earlier, which was, you have to go to trial. What happens when you go to court, what does this feel like? What does this look like? We know, for example, that it's less, formal than the civil court, but it's still very serious. We know there isn't a jury there, as we see in movies. What is it that a judge does? What is it that happens in trials?
So yeah, court these days is mostly remote.
Woohoo!
The only hearings we still do in person are trials, but non-evidentiary hearings are all done via a telephonic system, which, as far as I know, and talking to some of the judges, is actually going to be changed over to predominantly video conferencing for most of the calendar, which is reasonable. Most people, more often than not, the issues we have to go to court over are just small legal issues or small little disputes that aren't necessarily trials. And if the injured worker was required to appear at every court appearance, a lot of times that would be really prejudicial to them because they don't have the money, they don't have the ability to get to court, they don't have transportation, they're medically unable to move around that much. So having everything done virtually has been a blessing for a lot of people. It's given a lot of people more access to the courts than they would have had before, which is great.
Right.
But, when we do go to court for trials, I guess it's like TV. I mean, there's no juries, but like, we have judges, we present witnesses, we take testimony, we cross-examine witnesses. We have those gotcha moments where we're kind of interrogating people, and we're doing our lawyer thing, and it's like what you envision it is. People are objecting to things. It's a trial. It's the real deal. But generally at trial, it's all about putting on witnesses and documents to support your case and whatever issues being tried at that particular time. And you can have trials throughout the case that are on different issues. In workers' comp, unlike a civil trial where you get one big trial, workers' comp, you can have multiple trials throughout the same case on different issues.
So it's like you're battling out these different issues and sometimes have to take it to trial to show that witness or to get that doctor to provide that testimony or to have, that essential record that is going to prove why you're battling this particular part of your workers' comp case.
Yeah,
That's
an
crazy.
example of this might be your temporary disability benefits. Maybe the insurance company is paying you at the wrong rate, they're lowballing you. We might go to trial over just what your temporary disability rate should be. Or we might go to trial at the end of a case on what your permanent disability rating is and, kind of the end trial as it is. So you can go to trial on a variety of reasons.
I think it's very important, Bilal, to also talk about what judges are not going to do at a trial. I know there's a lot of people that think the judge is just going to be like, hey, he's going to grant me $100,000 on my case. Is that even a thing?
No, so judges, you know, workers' comp judges are judges. They're real judges. We pronounce we say Your Honor, and Judge so and so. We show respect to them just as we would any other judge. They just have limited tools available to them to be able to award you certain things, and the judges have the ability to award you permanent disability, temporary disability, and medical care. Beyond that, there's not a lot. They can still hold you in contempt and do all the judge stuff that they would in any other court, but there's a really big misconception that people like to say, well, we'll just go to trial, I'll let the judge decide. And coming from experience and knowing what the judge can and can't do, there's a lot of things people want that the judge doesn't have the power to decide. The judge doesn't have the power to award you money in place of medical care. The judge doesn't have the power to award you lost future wages. The judge doesn't really have power to act beyond what's in your record. If you've got medical records that say you weren't injured at work, all the doctors agree, your attitude can't be, we'll let the judge decide, because the judge is going to side with whatever's in the medical records. So I think there's a really big misconception about the power that they have, and going to trial isn't what it means, I think, in civil case, where you're really presenting your case and there's someone who's impartial, who has the power to decide whatever they want. The judges are impartial, but they have limited resources and tools.
But I think the good side of having the judge or going to trial is to hold the insurance companies accountable for some of the things that they try to get away with. But once in front of a judge, he enforces, like, come on, guys, like, you guys got to get it together. So I guess there's a good side to it, at the
Yeah,
end of
and
the day.
look, unlike a jury, you ever see that movie, Let's Go to Prison? It's a
I don't, I
Jack
don't think
Shepherd.
so.
It's a funny movie, but they're basically saying the three scariest words in the English language are trial by jury. And and the whole joke is that a trial by jury is terrible because you're being judged by a panel of your peers who have zero experience in whatever that topic is.
Right,
If I'm being tried for something, I want to know that the people who are judging me know what they're talking about,
right.
right? So when you're talking about a judge who's specific to workers' compensation, they know what they're doing. They know what the law is. They're so well versed and experienced that they know what's up. And
Yeah,
as a lawyer trying to put on a case, I'm putting on a case to the most educated person in the room,
that's
which
true.
is a huge benefit versus, if I had to go to trial in front of a jury, people who've never been in workers' comp before,
Yeah.
it's scary, right?
Definitely scary. So I'm glad you're putting all of these tips out there, and we do see your comments. We are going to have an open Q&A session at the end of this, and I promise you we're almost getting to the end part of it, and hope that you've been able to kind of get that information and get the knowledge that we're able to provide and share with you throughout this ultimate webinar. So Pacific Workers, they are your partners in workers' comp. We mentioned this earlier at the beginning. It's a 98% success rate. You know, you being the co-founder of this company, Bilal, your ultimate goal is to fight aggressively and get as much as you can back for clients. How much would you say that Pacific Workers has recovered for clients throughout Northern California and in all the cases that you guys have taken?
I want to say it's over $350 million at this point.
That you guys have taken from insurance companies and given back to the injured workers. That's amazing. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Not enough. I will say it's never enough. Right? That's a fraction of what it should be for these people.
That's right. It's also known as one of the highest average recoveries in California. There's a lot of smaller companies, smaller law firms out there helping injured workers. But there is an amazing thing that embodies this company, and that is the amount of people that work, the amount of people that are trained, the team members. I think there's a total of 90 team members in this law firm alone now. So it's not like you're going to have to wait millions of years to hear back from your attorney. It's the system, the way it was built for this company to be successful. There are no upfront fees, and again, I can't stress this enough. If an attorney is charging you ahead of time, then that attorney is doing something sketchy, because they're paid on contingency, meaning you don't pay the attorney until you win. And technically, you don't even pay them. It comes out of your settlement. It never comes out of your bank account as well, right? So there are 6 locations throughout Northern California, and Sacramento, Tracy, Stockton, San Jose, Oakland, and Concord being those 6 locations, but reach a very dense area as well. So there isn't a corner that we don't visit. And now that, a lot of things are virtual, I've noticed, and this is something probably that you can help me better understand, Bilal. I've noticed a lot of ads that I see on television nowadays from companies that are not even from the Bay Area. They're not even from Northern California. A lot of companies from Southern California. What is the benefit of me hiring someone out in LA?
So, regardless of who you hire, you should hire someone who has some understanding of the local environment. Look, doctors mostly practice locally. You
Yep.
know, judges are local. We see the same judges over and over again. I couldn't tell you who half the judges are in San Diego, but I could tell you every judge in Oakland. And I think those relationships matter in some instances. Knowing and having relationships with doctors' offices to get treatment, set up quicker, better appointments, getting forms filled out, stuff like that. There is a lot of benefit to having a local attorney.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in regards to doctors and stuff that you can also find in the pocket guidebook that you wrote below. So, for those of you that are watching this webinar right now, what makes specific workers completely different, completely stand out? The technology, that's probably one of my number one things about being able to help injured workers track their case through an app on their phone. They know exactly what's happening. They're able to just shoot a text message to their team to be able to get those answers. Being in a legal battle is not something that you can just kind of brush off and be like, hey, yeah, I don't know, they're taking care of it. It's stressful. You wake up every morning thinking about it. You go to sleep about it, thinking about it as well. So having the ability to connect and that superior technology that not a lot of companies have nowadays is definitely a benefit for anyone that's going through the workers' compensation system. Again, contingency based fees, meaning if you don't win, there you don't pay anything. Our team, highly trained team of over 90 people that are here to assist you. And heck, below you wrote the book on the workers' comp. It's the pocket guide to the workers' compensation system. So I definitely think if I wanted someone fighting on my side to be able to help me navigate, you know, the ins and outs and the webs of the workers' compensation system, I definitely would like to know that someone's actually wrote a book about it, because writing books is not easy nowadays either. So that actually tells you something, no?
I would hope so.
Which, by the way, if you've joined this webinar, you are also going to be entitled to the California Workers' Comp book, and you'll be able to download it directly on any of your favorite platforms on your cell phone, iPad, laptop. It's in a PDF form. You get to keep it. You get to find so much information on there, including information in regards to COVID. People are still getting COVID nowadays. People still are fighting and having long-lasting effects, and there are certain rules that go into place as well for firefighters, for EMTs. We also have a book for that. If you're a firefighter and if you're a police officer, there are different rules specified depending on your job and your position to be able to navigate the workers' comp system as well. So here's what your next steps are going to be. You are going to definitely want to get a free consultation if you have not been able to connect with an attorney and you're still battling the compensation system by yourself. I highly recommend to work with a free consultation with any workers' comp specialist that is going to be able to answer those really deep questions that you've probably just been questioning about. Again, there's no obligation, just expert advice. There's nothing that says you have to sign a contract with anyone, whether that's with someone from Pacific Workers Compensation Law Center or whether that's with another law center. It does not make you like have to sign a contract and automatically get them to represent you. With us, you get your free book. Make sure you download this book. It's going to really dive deeper into some of the conversations we've had throughout this webinar. So we highly recommend for you to just download the book. If anything you took from this webinar, this free book, and we're here for you. We're here to help you. We're here to allow you to focus on that recovery more than anything, because the ultimate goal is for you to get your life back, and it's for you to get back to your family. It's for you to try to get back to where you were at prior to getting that illness or prior to getting that injury. So if you have to kind of separate your time between recovery, between appointments, and figuring out how the system works, are you truly giving it your best to be able to focus on your recovery? So definitely having someone deal with all the calls and all the medical appointments that you have to look for and all the whole back and forth negotiation, it benefits to have someone on your side. So get that free consultation, get that book, because we have people waiting for you to fight for your rights, and they're ready to have your back as well. So with that, we are going to finalize the webinar. However, we would like to open it up for any Q&As, any questions that you guys have that you guys want to drop. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can go ahead and just write your question on the chat as well. I do have a few lined up for you, Bilal, and it's from Dave. And he's going to write them in shortly for us, if you will. And we also want to say thank you to Woody, who has been watching us also on YouTube. And he says this has been great information. There's someone wishing you happy holidays as well. They're right around the corner. So with that being said, I think our number one question here is, what if I don't want to settle the amount that was given to me? What happens next? You said that, the insurance companies are not obligated to settle out your case. What are my options now?
So it boils down to what your case is actually worth and what the insurance company is willing to pay. If the amount that you want is more than what your case is worth, holding out isn't going to do much. Like I said, the judge only has so much power to award something. So if your permanent disability is 25%, the insurance company is offering you the value of that 25% plus medical or just open medical care, saying, well, I want the judge to decide, or I'm just going to go to trial. That's not going to do anything because you're getting the full value of your case. You're just not happy with what the case is worth. And a lot of times that's the case. A lot of times the value of a workers' comp case is far less than it should be. And that's just a byproduct of the really crappy system that we live in. But there's other times where holding out makes sense. If the insurance company isn't valuing your case appropriately in terms of the value of the permanent disability,
Right.
going to trial can actually improve the value you get. Or if your case is denied because of some legal or factual issue and the insurance company's offering you crap because they think your case is going to end up closing with nothing, but it's worth far more, then yeah, going to trial or pushing towards trial or holding out will help you potentially get more money. But it's really just, it's situational. Every case is different. There's some times where holding out makes sense. There's some times that it doesn't.
Right.
And it's ultimately figuring out what that point is and, having someone who knows what's going on to be able to explain that to you.
That makes sense. All right, so I have another one here. It says, hey, I have an MSC coming up. Can you explain what an MSC is when you answer this question as well? My attorney didn't respond to the settlement to my old job offered and claimed that they didn't know it was sent because I had to call them and let them know. What are my options when I miss this opportunity?
So can you read that last part again, the note?
Yes, so apparently it says that their attorney didn't respond to the settlement that they had offered, and because they didn't see this message, so therefore they feel like they lost that opportunity to settle, and then they have an MSC coming up because the attorney missed that settlement offer. What is an MSC and what are their options?
MSE stands for Mandatory Settlement Conference. It's nothing to be too concerned about. It's a hearing where the parties essentially come together to try and work out whatever the issue is. And an MSC is often used when one side's not responding. So if I send the insurance company a settlement demand and I don't get a response and the case is ready for trial, I'll request an MSC. Just because you have an MSC set doesn't mean you can't settle. Your attorney can contact the insurance company or the defense attorney before the MSC and talk settlement. And generally at the MSC, you'll also have an opportunity to talk about settlement then. So, there's a lot of times leading up to, including the time of the mandatory settlement conference, where you can still discuss settlement. So it's not necessarily a missed opportunity. It's just, well, it's one missed opportunity, but it doesn't hurt. There'll be plenty more to discuss settlement.
Okay, so we have another question. It says, this makes so much sense. However, my doctor's office closed down and now I'm forced to change doctors. How will that affect my workers' comp claim?
That happens sometimes. Every now and then a practice will close or a practice will get kicked out of the medical provider network. So you're going to be told, this doctor is no longer in our network. You need to find a new one. Sometimes it can cause delays. It takes time getting to a doctor. An initial appointment can take weeks.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if you're injured, you're receiving benefits, you need ongoing work status report certifications, you need updated treatment recommendations or medications. You know, those are a lot of, in those situations, it can be complex. But if you have to select a new doctor, you have to select a new doctor. And more often than not, that means going back to the MPN, submitting a new request for a new PTP. In an ideal world, if the new PTP can get you in quickly, they can give you an updated work status and things like that, there's not really going to be much, if any, problems or delays with your case.
Got it.
I will say that I've seen a lot of complex cases become difficult to place. If you're someone with a multitude of injuries, you've had multiple surgeries, a lot of doctors are reluctant to jump in and take over a case like that because they don't know your history and they're not comfortable with it. And I've seen in those cases it become more of a problem in getting someone the care they need, quickly.
Yikes. Okay. So we have Dave who has written to us as well, and he says he was injured 3 years ago. He has an attorney here in SoCal. AME rated at 68%, cut down to 49% with apportioned. His boss wants him to retire, but he wants to work more years. The job had no accommodations. What can he do? He's been given little treatment. Attorney is completely ignoring him. What can he do? What would you suggest?
So, it sounds like it's a pretty high rating. If there's multiple body parts involved, for the rating side of things, I would consider getting a vocational expert. And if you have pre-existing problems along with that high of a rating, you might actually be entitled to something called SIBTF. It's Subsequent Injuries Benefits Trust Fund, which is a program in California that's designed to compensate you when a work comp injury is pretty bad, and then you have a bunch of pre-existing stuff that altogether makes your condition way worse than it would be otherwise. So this might be a great SIBTF case. There might be something that can be done with getting that rating up with the use of a vocational counselor. But as far as your retirement's concerned, in California, your employer has an obligation to engage in the good faith interactive process,
Right.
meaning that they have to determine whether or not they can accommodate the work restrictions provided by your doctor. To the extent they do engage in that process, then technically they can let you go. They're not forced to be in a position where they can keep you at work with work restrictions. It would be prejudicial or unduly burdensome, things that are, things they can't accommodate. So I would say the first step in maybe trying to avoid that is getting the doctor to change the work restrictions. The work restrictions set by your AME, for example, if that's who's writing the work restrictions, are subject to dispute. We request change in work restrictions all the time. I've had clients who've had pretty significant permanent disability ratings also go back to work with work restrictions or without work restrictions because I've asked the AME. I've said, hey doctor, this person is confident that they're able to do X, Y, and Z tasks. Do you think it would be okay for them to go back to work, at least on a trial basis, unrestricted duty to see if they can handle it?
Right.
So going back to the AME potentially to get the work restrictions changed, that could be of benefit. Of course, at the same time, you have to think changing work restrictions might not jive with a very high permanent disability rating because when you have a high permanent disability rating, oftentimes you are saying that there's functional limitations. Try to change work restrictions to make it seem like you're better than you are might be contradicting that a little bit. So that's a delicate balance for sure. But yeah, at the end of the day, if your employer cannot accommodate your work restrictions, then technically you can be let go. I don't
Yikes.
know, Dave, if you're a state employee or if you have a disability retirement option at your current employment, but that's always something to consider too if you're forced out of employment. There, there's really no way to fight a layoff if it's legitimate in good faith. If they didn't do things in good faith, meaning they didn't reasonably see if they could accommodate you, there's actually a claim under the Fair Employment Housing Act as well as the ADA for unlawful discrimination because they failed to accommodate work restrictions. So you also want to make sure if they're not accommodating your work restrictions that it's not just pretext for discrimination. Your boss telling you they want you to retire and also they can't accommodate your work restrictions is a little suspect to me.
Yeah.
That's just those two things don't sound great together. They want you gone and they say they can't have you there. It's a little bit self-serving, but it's not always a clear situation. But yeah, I see here you're a government employee. I assume you're covered by CalPERS, which CalPERS definitely has a disability retirement. And when you're looking at disability retirement, you want to consider whether it's going to be more financially advantageous than your service requirement under CalPERS. There's formulas for both of those. So depending on the number of service years you have for disability retirement as well as, or sorry, service retirement versus disability retirement, it potentially can give you a better financial advantage for the long term. Under CalPERS disability retirement too, there are provisions from you working while you're on disability retirement. There's various restrictions to what you can and can't do, but there's options. So maybe if you want to continue on working, it's just not in the same capacity, you might be able to do that. But I would talk to your CalPERS rep, and they could help you and guide you a little bit more on that as well.
There's another question out there as well, and it's very similar to what Dave's originally started with. He has an attorney that's not answering, that's kind of MIA. This person is saying, am I allowed to change attorneys in the middle of my case? And would you recommend that?
Yeah, you're allowed to change attorneys. You file a substitution of attorney, the new attorney takes over. Your old attorney will file a lien on your case, meaning they'll say, hey, you know what, we did some work on your case, we want to be paid for that. Changing attorney won't necessarily increase the value or it won't increase the cost to you. The attorneys will just fight over that same fixed percentage that one attorney would have been awarded in the first place. But choosing or changing attorneys can be a big deal depending on where you're at in your case. And, there's good times to do it and there's bad times to do it. If you're at the end of your case and you're just hoping that changing attorneys might get you more, that's not probably the best move, I would say. If you're early on in your case, you're not getting treatment, maybe it's been several months, you don't have an AME or a QME, you feel like things are moving slow, then maybe it is a good time to change your attorney. I think you'll know when you talk to your attorney, and if they inspire confidence, they can tell you the things that they've done and worked on and got for you. Those are all, telling signs, I think, whether or not it's going to be a good decision.
Speaking about attorneys, Bilal, what are some of the questions as an injured worker if they're going to go get that free consultation, which, by the way, you can do so with us as well. And all you have to do is visit pacificworkers.com. The number is on the top. The consultations are free. What are some of the questions an injured worker can ask during this consultation?
I think a lot of the questions I get that are tough questions are, cases where they're denied. And so if you have a denied case, you should be asking specifics about, the attorney's confidence and whether or not they'll be able to get the case accepted. If, for example, your case was denied because your boss says you were an independent contractor or that you weren't actually hurt on the job or that, you were on an unpaid lunch period or that you weren't on a job site, things like that, those are big issues. And I think you'd want to know that your attorney is confident enough in their knowledge of the law that when they take on your case, they know that your case is going to be accepted at the end of the day. They're confident that they'll be able to win at trial. A lot of the
Right.
other questions, these are questions that anyone should ask. And it's, how do the benefits work? How does medical treatment work in workers' comp? Do I get all the stuff the doctor wants? What is utilization review? What is IMR? Do I get reimbursed mileage? There's so many questions that you can ask, but you probably don't know. And so I'd say
Right.
the best sensation you can have as a client is knowing that regardless of the questions you have, you know that there's someone that'll be there to answer them throughout the case. Because when you first hire an attorney, you're not going to know everything. And I think the biggest thing that you can have confidence in is your ability to actually get in touch with people who are representing you to answer your questions when they do come up.
Right. Okay, we have one final question here, and it's from Woody. And he says, I have surgery coming up this month. That's for a torn rotator cuff, but my initial problem was my tricep. What should I do?
Ooh, that's a tough medical one. So just because your doctor recommends surgery doesn't mean you need to immediately get it. In workers' comp, you are entitled to second opinions as well as third opinions as well. So if you feel like maybe the doctor is not on point with what you need, you are entitled to seek a second opinion from another doctor. So I don't know if you have both a separate tricep as well as a rotator cuff issue. If both of those need to be addressed, then maybe medically addressing the rotator cuff first is the best thing to do. I'm not entirely sure in this case. I would say if you're at all uncomfortable with moving forward with surgery, then certainly seek a second opinion. And that would be done by requesting a copy of the MPN if you're by yourself, selecting a second orthopedic surgeon, and asking for a second evaluation to get a second opinion to see if the doctor agrees that moving forward with the rotator cuff is the best thing to do. But it sounds like it's a pretty nuanced question. So, if you do have an attorney, I would definitely talk to them about that. This might just be the order things need to be addressed. It's hard to say.
Sounds great. Well, I think that's it for this webinar. As much as I would love to stay on here and continue to talk more because we can talk for days, we do highly recommend you guys to check out some of our videos on our YouTube channel for the podcast. That's Work Comp Talk Podcast. You can get a ton of information on there as well with in-depth conversations that Bilal and I have had throughout. Again, if you want to schedule your free consultation, go ahead and visit pacificworkers.com. You can get on a schedule it at your earliest convenience time that fits best for you. And you can also get the book downloaded on the website as well. And we do appreciate everyone joining us on this webinar. We are going to do more webinars, so if you do get the chance to catch on a second webinar, you might find information that we didn't share for the first one. Once again, thank you, everyone. We're here to help you. Once again, my name is Carmen. Thank you, Bilal, for helping me make this webinar happen, and we promise to give you guys more. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Thank you. Bye.